I have always been an Apple fanboy. I own and use iMac, MacBook Pro, iPad, iPhone, and obviously an Apple Vision Pro. It's not fake, it just has the same usefulness as the original. Anyway, here's the challenge. Can I use Windows? To make things harder, I will use a generic gaming laptop on a deserted island, untouched by the presence of humans. Nearly untouched by the presence of humans. And in order to battle test my programming skills in this setup, I will code in Rust and try to make at least one new game compatible with TouchIChili, an open source iOS emulator. And why?
Are we doing this?
For content.
Let me clarify the rules of this challenge. Start from freshly installed Windows. Only use Windows tools and applications, with one exception. Make at least one new game fully compatible with TouchIChili, and no crying is allowed. Ready, set, go! Where is the command line? The first day I spent installing necessary tools and programs. To reverse engineer old games, you need to install US government approved spying software.
Huh?
And I don't mean iOS itself, I mean Ghidra. All jokes aside, Ghidra is software reverse engineering framework by NSA. Other required software includes Rust Rover, SourceTree, and something for inspiration. I recently did some solid progress with Gameloft games, like Rayman 2 and Dungeon Hunter. It's only natural to see if other Gameloft games can work too. I chose the game which proudly holds the title of the second most family-breaking game in history, just after the Monopoly. It's, of course, Uno. First try, first fail. In order to fix that unimplemented NS dictionary description, we need to go deeper. Remember that exception from the list? You need to have a running OS X Leopard in a virtual machine in order to build and run iPhone OS 2 test applications. And in order to be fully legally compliant, one will need to run a VM on the Apple hardware and remotely connect to it from a Windows machine. And what is the point to use Windows only setup if you still need to have running MacBook around? Anyway, after VM was ready, I wrote a small test program to confirm the behavior of NS dictionary description. Now I will be able to run this test program in both VM and TouchIChili and compare the outputs. After fighting several times with the Rust borrow checker and fixing few bugs, my implementation is ready. Running the Uno app again in the TouchIChili, we have a different crash now. We, developers, call this the progress. And look, the dictionary description is printed out too. But it's empty, meaning that all of the troubles of implementing the real description of NS dictionary was unnecessary. We, developers, call that the efficiency. Implementing few more dummy functions and stubs gives us the following. We have a crash again, but unfortunately this is a dead end, as even the single-player mode requires a full networking support, which is not something I am able to do right now. This marks the end of the second day, and it's time to reflect on different Windows issues. First of all, I just couldn't stop using Mac keyboard shortcuts on Windows. Second, and more annoying, this bad boy is too damn hot. Sometimes, for no clear reason, the system load jumps and laptop fans start to spin like crazy. On the third day, I decided to look for another game to support and do a step back. And not just a small one, but a step way back to 2008, the year when the original iPhone SDK was revealed. During the announcement, Apple showcased few games, such as Super Monkey Ball and Spore. Spore Origins is a mobile spin-off of Spore and focuses on the prebiotic soup stage of the game. The proper support for this game was already attempted by Hikari, the original creator of Touchy Chili, and later by Tyroman, who opened a pull request on the GitHub. Unfortunately, even after those attempts, the game is still unplayable. A very first issue relates to entering the name of the creature, crashing the app on the assertion about unsupported C-string encoding. The name of desired encoding NS-UTF-16 Little Endian. String encoding. Whew. One of Touchy Chili contributors, Alboraja, already submitted a patch set implementing that, and it's a perfect opportunity to test it out. After cherry picking the changes, I started the game again, and... even without any keyboard input, it generates a garbage string, which means that patch set have an issue. So it's time for a code review. The problem is right there. The size of a null terminator should be 2 bytes for this encoding and not 1. After fixing that problem and rewriting the patch set, the text input is now working as expected, and I can finally name my creature Yummy.
Yeah, boy.
Still, the actual launch of the game is crashing with a null page access error. There is no really other option as to import Spore in Ghidra and start checking the disassembled code. Conveniently, Touchy Chili prints the state of CPU registers just at the crash. While normally I will use the program counter PC, here it has nonsensical 4 value. Luckily, we can still use the link register LR, which basically gives us a position of the next instruction in the originated call function just before the crash. Wait, let me re-explain that in general audience-friendly manner.
The link register LR, which basically gives us a position of the next instruction in the originated call function just before the crash.
Checking the link register address in Ghidra, I started my investigation. This type of crashes is most painful, and to resolve this one I tried nearly everything. Enabling more logs, tracing execution in the debugger, and starting for hours inside impenetrable void of ARM assembly. It did not help, and now I don't have other choice but to use my ultimate fixing technique, randomly modifying parts of the code and seeing if it works. And by some random chance, after commenting out this part, the game now goes into the first level. This is not by any means a proper fix, because it creates a memory leak. The proper fix consists in retaining the NS notification observer up until notifications are delivered. But even after committing this fix, the game is still crashing after the tutorial. And after even more hours of investigation, I concluded that this game have a problem. And it's a classic bug of use after free, which should not be that surprising as developer of Spore is Electronic Arts. And EA just love recycle the same garbage again and again.
EA Games.
Recycle everything.
This also means that we need to do a game-specific hack. basically move zeroing out memory from free function to alloc function. And it does work on Windows, but it does not work on Android. And yeah, remember, no crying is allowed, so I will not talk about building for Android on Windows with Rust and SDL. I spent more time fixing this Android crash than I am willing to admit. Desperate, I started to use GDB, which stands for Great Dwarf Boobs. GNU Project Debugger. Basically, I launched two versions of Touchy Chili, one on Android and one on Windows, and connected to them with two instances of GDB. Then I started to trace the execution, step by step, instruction by instruction. Hours passed, days passed, and I came to a simple realization. I introduced the problem myself. You see, on Windows I was launching Spore with Touchy Chili directly, passing a path of a file with a command line arguments. In this case, the memory fix was applied just before the game starts. But on Android we are required to pass by the app picker, and in that case the memory fix was not applied. Once I understood the origin of the problem, it was trivial to fix. And now we do have a working Spore on both Windows and Android. In conclusion, can an Apple fan use Windows for programming? Yes, absolutely. Is it a pleasant experience? It depends. Regarding the Touchy Chili updates, I was able to partially fix Uno and fully fix Spore origins. After recording majority of this video, I switched back to developing on macOS and was able to make Touchy Chili compatible with many more games. To name a few: Zombie Infection,
So much for laying low.
Prince of Persia: Warrior Within,
Is this the best you have to offer?
It seems the Empress overestimated your abilities.
The Empress?
Command and Conquer: Red Alert,
Enemy building captured.
Asphalt 5, Full list could be found in the changelog file of the Touchy Chili repository on GitHub. All of those games are already supported in the preview version of Touchy Chili, and you could already download it from touchychili.org website. In addition, we now have an app compatibility database, and we recently crossed a huge milestone of supporting more than 100 early iOS games. And I have some exciting progress regarding support for later versions of iOS. For example, I was able to boot iOS 4 games such as Shin Megami Tensei, World of Goo, and Devil May Square. I mean, which for some reasons only work if I force resolution to be squared. All of this work is highly experimental, and I do not expect it to be available for general audience anytime soon. If you want to stay informed, please consider subscribing to my channel and follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky platforms. If you want to support me financially, I now have a sponsorship enabled on my GitHub account. I could not promise that I will work on anything you want, even if you donate, so please regard this as a tip developer functionality. That's all for today, folks. Bye! My sponsorship on GitHub.